David Roches, who's an associate professor at the Near East South Asia Center for Security Studies. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. here. Really great to have you with us, David. I want to ask you, I guess, from an international perspective, we've seen international condemnation, calls for calm, calls to respect the democratic process. Those aren't calls that usually come from other countries when you talk about America, which I find very ironic and interesting. But I guess if I were to delve deeper, what does this say to America's adversaries when you look at how America's adversaries have actually tried to interfere in the U.S. election and sow division and discord? What sort of a vulnerable position does this put the country in when you look at how easily security was breached on the Capitol grounds today?
Well, I think we're drawing a little bit too much here. You know, what we're seeing is the local failure. A lot of people don't realize that there's a multitude of police agencies with different responsibilities in D.C. The Capitol has its own police force that is not under the control of the District of Columbia or under the control of the president. It's answerable to Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. They had to defend a static facility. They formed a cordon. Protesters massed at one point were able to push their way through. This will be studied. There'll be an inquest, and I'm sure there'll be some people fired. But it represents more of a tactical failure, not a systemic failure. The bigger issue is, the prestige of the United States has taken a blow here. On my Twitter, I have friends from Lebanon saying, Lebanon is going to deploy election monitors to the United States. So it's something we have to look at. But look, American democracy, this is outside the bounds of normalcy, but it's not something that's unexpected. When I first started teaching terrorism in the 1990s, the focus was on right-wing, domestic extremist terrorist movements, the kind of people who blew up the Oklahoma City Federal Building. That's always kind of been there. It's always been submerged. What's different here is, as your correspondent said, these movements tend to piggyback on legitimate political movements. So, you have tens of thousands of people who are being called to protest in favor of a president who does not respect tradition or convention. And a small percentage of that has managed to discredit his entire cause. So it's a complex issue. It affects our prestige. I don't think there'll be any lasting implications from it. And I think that this will probably be remembered as a historical oddity in 20 or 30 years.
When you look at the president's insistence that he is the rightful victor in this election, and at the point where he encourages his supporters to go to the Capitol to contest those election results, when he continues to double down and say that he's not going to respect the democratic process, at this point, Twitter has actually locked the president's account, basically saying that there is a quote unquote risk of violence. At what point does this go beyond a First Amendment right, free speech, and it moves into an area where the president has compromised his position in office?
Well, look, nobody thought they were getting Mitt Romney or a Washington person with Donald Trump. His persona he's the most unpresidential president we've ever had, at least going back to Andrew Jackson. But you made a point there that I think plays into the president's narrative. Nobody elected or voted for Twitter. And, unfortunately, grievances and the cycle of grievance is what really accelerates this. So if Twitter, silences the president, whether you agree for good reasons or bad reasons, supporters of the president are going to see that as further proof that this is rigged. We have to find a way to break out of this ever-tightening spiral of grievance and aggression. And I think that, I'm an inherent optimist. I think that people are going to look at this and say, whoa, this is not the country we want to live in. And this is not the way we're going to move this going forward. I think that this is a good time for people to take a step back. And I think that the Trump model of governance and of rallying, in his final days in office, is being thoroughly discredited for most mainstream Americans. So I think this will be seen as a sort of aberrational period in our historical development. There'll be some tactical adjustments going forward, things about building security and stuff like that. But I really don't think this portends a sea change in our national policy or national dialogue. And again, I would not treat any actions by a social media company as dispositive proof of anything, because that just plays into the narrative of grievance.
Yeah. And David, if we weren't talking about what happened at the Capitol earlier and those events that unfolded, we would have been talking about more than a dozen GOP senators who were taking a stand and contesting the Electoral College results here. And we probably would have been talking a little bit more about Georgia, which those 2 seats ended up going to the Democrats. So I guess when you look at pushing the country forward and you look at now the fact that the Democrats are going to control the House as well as the Senate, and we're going to have a Democratic president, what do the next 4 years look like for you?
Well, I don't think it'll be a revolutionary period. I mean, in many ways now, the most important man in U.S. politics is Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who is a Democrat, but is to the right of some Republicans such as Susan Collins or Mitt Romney on quite a few issues. And maintaining absolute party discipline is a very, very difficult thing in the Senate. He will represent the interests of West Virginia. And, we're not going to see revolutionary change because the United States is just not designed for revolutionary change. So I think what we're going to see is more of this. You raised Georgia. That's a very good issue. I think that the 12 senators, they realize there's no cost to them doing this. And I think they're taking the example of Stacey Abrams, the Georgia gubernatorial candidate for 2 years ago, who refused to admit defeat as well, and basically turned that into an incredible 2-year-long campaign, get out the vote effort that essentially transformed Georgia politics and enabled those 2 senators to be elected. I think that's what the 12 GOP senators were trying to do. I think that's what Trump is trying to do as well. But obviously, reaping the whirlwind with the base that appeals to Trump and has a broad range of grievances, not all of which are shared by President Trump. It's certainly this proclivity for not respecting the sanctity of the Capitol is I don't think shared by anybody of any responsibility. They're going to be tarred with that. So this is a step back for their movement.
Yeah, it's hard to prove intent, but we certainly saw how demonstrators today perceived those remarks from the president. But David, we really appreciate you being with us. David DeRoche.